Hey guys, tonight we're heading into a story you probably didn't expect. The kind of history that mixes queens, giraffes, and the smell of camel dung all in one neat, slightly absurd package. Imagine it. You're standing in the shifting sands of ancient Africa, a soft wind brushing across your face, and in the distance, the long, graceful neck of a giraffe sways back and forth like some weird desert metronome. It's almost too strange to believe, but here we are. And let's be honest, if you ever had to choose between facing a Roman legion or a queen perched on a giraffe, towering above the battlefield like some kind of majestic, sand-colored tower, well, you probably just run the other way. Not that you get far, the sand has a way of sticking in your sandals. And let's not even talk about how hot it gets out here. I mean, you think a summer day in Arizona is brutal? The Sahara laughs at that. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? And what time is it where you are right now? I'd love to know if you're lying in bed in Oslo at midnight, or maybe half asleep on a couch in Manila. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in a dry, sun-bleached clearing, somewhere between the ancient kingdoms of Kush and the vast, shimmering sands of the Sahara. The air tastes like dust and warm wind, with a faint tang of sweat and old, oiled leather. In the distance, a line of figures moves slowly, queens, draped in layers of gold, feathers, and flowing cloth, their faces stern and gleaming in the sun. And there, striding beside them, like a dream someone forgot to finish, are giraffes. Not just any giraffes. These are battle giraffes, their long necks swaying like banners, their backs draped with strange, saddle-like contraptions that seem designed more for ceremony than practicality. You squint, trying to imagine how someone thought this was a good idea. It's like showing up to a Formula One race on a pogo stick. Bold, sure, but maybe not your safest option. The queens ride tall, their eyes fixed on the horizon, where Roman banners flutter in the distance. There's Amanirenas. Oh yes, you've heard of her. A one-eyed queen with a glare sharp enough to shave wood. The Romans thought they could roll over her lands like a chariot over sand, but she had other plans. And you, standing here, can't help but feel the energy in the air, like a storm about to crack open the sky. The giraffes snort and stamp their hooves, uneasy in the tension. A trainer, let's call him Kebi, though history hasn't remembered his name, clicks his tongue, whispering in a mix of soft clicks and low hums. The giraffes listen. Well, mostly. One of them, a tall, lanky creature with dark patches like spilled ink, decides to wander off toward a patch of acacia trees, probably thinking, you know what? I'm too pretty for war. The queens prepare, adjusting their headdresses, their bracelets jingling softly. The scent of crushed herbs and warm skin fills the air, mixed with something less pleasant, a faint whiff of camel dung drying in the sun. You're not sure if it's part of the war paint ritual or just an unfortunate breeze. Either way, you try not to breathe too deeply. And that's when you notice something else. An odd pattern painted on the giraffe's flanks. Swirls and lines in ochre and charcoal, almost like tribal tattoos, meant to confuse enemies, or maybe just to make a fashion statement. Historians still debate the exact purpose of those markings, of course. Some say it was camouflage, others say it was symbolic, something to do with the gods of the desert, or maybe a queen's personal flair. Honestly, it's the kind of thing you'd argue about at a very sleepy museum panel, while quietly sipping your overpriced coffee. You run your fingers over the leather of a discarded giraffe saddle. It's rough, stitched from hide with bronze rings and faint traces of red dye that's mostly faded now. You wonder what it felt like to ride that high, swaying with every step of an animal designed for a much more peaceful life. plucking leaves, not dodging spears. The sun beats down, so bright it blurs the edges of everything. Your eyelids droop. The drumming of distant hoofbeats blends into the soft rustle of dry grasses, the chirp of birds hidden in the shade. A butterfly drifts past, pale, delicate, as if unaware that war is about to unfold. You almost smile. Even here, in a place of queens and giraffes and spears, nature does its own thing. And then you hear it, the low, rhythmic thump of drums in the distance, a sound that vibrates in your chest, slow and steady, like the heartbeat of the land itself. The queens raise their eyes, the giraffes' ears twitch. The moment hangs in the air, waiting. And you? You just stand there, sand sticking to your feet, and wonder if you remembered to pack your sunscreen. The one made from crushed crocodile scales and fermented fig paste, because apparently that was a thing in some parts of Africa. Who knew? But there's no turning back now. The drums are calling, and the giraffes, with their dreamy eyes and absurdly long lashes, are ready, at least, as ready as a giraffe can be for battle. Your breath slows, the air hums, and somewhere under this sun and sky, a new chapter is about to begin. You're still standing there, aren't you? The sand is hot against your feet, and there's this faint, almost musical creak of leather as the giraffes shift, their hooves leaving lazy half-moons in the dust. The queens, well, they don't seem to notice the heat. They're busy looking regal, standing tall with their eyes set on the horizon, like they've got an invisible playlist in their heads that only they can hear. You, meanwhile, are still trying to figure out how exactly someone convinces a giraffe to march into battle. You glance at Amanirenas again. Yes, her. One eye hidden behind a strip of linen, the other sharp enough to cut glass. There's a certain look in her face, a kind of I dare you energy that makes you glad you're just a spectator here. She holds a short, curved sword in one hand, tapping it absent-mindedly against her thigh. It makes a quiet, rhythmic sound, like the ticking of a clock counting down to something inevitable. And then you notice the others. Queens in shimmering fabrics that catch the light, wrapped in beads and tiny golden charms that jingle softly with each movement. Their faces painted with streaks of white and red, war paint, sure, but also a little bit of personal flair. One queen has feathers woven into her hair, bright splashes of red and yellow that flutter when the wind picks up. Another wears a necklace of polished bones, and you don't want to think too hard about where those came from. The giraffes themselves are oddly majestic, even a little awkward. They blink slowly, almost like they're considering a philosophical question that no one else in the world will ever understand. Their saddles are strapped tight across their backs, a patchwork of leather and woven fibers with carved wooden handles for the riders to grip. And you know what? The saddles don't look very comfortable. You can't help but imagine a queen mid-battle, trying to stay balanced on top of a giraffe, while also looking fierce and not falling off in front of her enemies. One giraffe snorts, lifting its head high, and you swear it gives you a look that says, "I was made for acacia trees, not this nonsense." You drift a little, feeling the heat press in, the wind carrying the distant scent of dry grasses, mixed with a hint of something sharper. Maybe crushed mint or the lingering smoke of an old fire. The air tastes like old stories. And then, just as you're starting to nod off, bam! A trumpet sounds from somewhere ahead. The Roman lines, apparently. You squint, trying to make out the shapes beyond the heat shimmer. And there they are. Rows of Roman soldiers, shiny and organized, their segmented armor glinting like they've all just walked off a parade float. They're holding up their shields, those big, rectangular ones that make them look like a wall of bronze beetles. But here's the thing. Those Romans, they look a little confused. You can almost see the collective eyebrow raise from across the field as they try to make sense of the situation. Queens on giraffes. Giraffes painted like tribal murals, and you can practically hear one Roman whisper to another. "I didn't read about this in the manual, did you?" There's a pause, an awkward one, like when you show up at a costume party and realize you're the only one who actually wore a costume. The Romans shuffle, glance at each other, and you swear you see one of them, maybe a young guy, helmet too big for his head, just sort of... see. But then, the queens move. Amanirenas lifts her sword high, and the giraffes lurch forward, long legs moving in a strange, elegant rhythm. Their necks sway like the masts of ships, and the queens ride high, banners fluttering, jewelry sparkling in the sun. You're not sure whether to cheer or wince, but you do know that somewhere deep inside, you're thinking, this is either going to be really cool or a complete disaster. And of course, the historians still argue about how it all played out. Some say the queens charged in a glorious, dust-kicking rush that left the Romans scrambling like startled pigeons. Others insist it was more of a dignified procession, a psychological tactic rather than an all-out attack. Honestly, nobody really knows for sure. What we do know is that the Romans, despite all their training and fancy formations, were utterly baffled by the sight of giraffes in battle. You lean back a little, squinting into the sun, and you can almost hear a Roman centurion muttering under his breath. Giraffes, really? And you, standing in the middle of all this, wonder if you're dreaming. Or maybe you've just been in the sun too long, and you're starting to hallucinate. The heat does funny things to a person, you know. A breeze kicks up, carrying the scent of the desert. Hot, dry, with a faint undertone of something herbal, like sage or maybe wild thyme. The queens press forward, their giraffes stepping carefully over the sand, and the Romans slowly start to realize that they have absolutely no idea how to respond. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sound of the drums, the creak of leather, and the distant shouts blend together into a kind of dreamlike hum. The sun is so bright, the air so heavy, that it feels like you're melting into the moment, half listening, half sleeping, and entirely lost in a time where queens rode giraffes into battle, and history forgot to explain exactly why. The sand under your feet crunches softly as you shift your weight, the heat pressing down like a warm, heavy blanket you didn't ask for. The sound of the drums grows fainter, almost blending into the low, murmuring hum of the wind. And for a second, it feels like you could close your eyes and drift away. But then, there's a scent that snaps you back. It's sharp, earthy, with a hint of something smoky. You breathe in deeper, and yeah, that's camel dung. Dry, sun-baked, crumbling into the air like dust. You wrinkle your nose, but what can you do? This is the ancient world. There are no scented candles or air purifiers out here. The queens, though, they seem unfazed. They're standing tall, moving gracefully through the dust, their robes swirling around them in slow, deliberate buoys. It's like they're floating, except for the fact that they're also kind of baking under the sun. You can almost feel the heat radiating off their skin, like the warm glow from an old stove. One queen, maybe it's Queen Amanirenas again, or maybe another, lifts a small, ornate jar from a saddle pouch. The jar is carved from ivory, decorated with tiny figures of birds and leaves. She dips her fingers in, and you catch the scent of crushed herbs, sandalwood, and... Is that camel fat? You try not to gag. Apparently, this is part of the war paint ritual. They smear it across their arms and cheeks, a mixture of oils, herbs, and yes, a little bit of camel dung. Because someone, somewhere, decided that was a good idea. You start to think maybe you wouldn't survive long in this world. You'd probably collapse from heat stroke after 10 minutes, or get trampled by a particularly moody giraffe. Or worse, accidentally insult a queen by stepping on the wrong kind of beetle, because apparently that was a thing. Historians still argue about the details, of course. Whether stepping on certain beetles was considered an omen or just a very bad day. You imagine a tiny, ancient argument. Did you just step on the sacred beetle of the goddess Tefnut? No, I swear it was an accident. Tell that to the sandstorm. The giraffes, meanwhile, are standing there looking absolutely regal. Well, most of them. One giraffe has drool slowly dripping from its mouth, and it's staring off into the distance like it's thinking about the meaning of life. Another is chewing on a dry branch with a kind of slow, meditative determination that makes you feel like maybe you're the weird one here. You feel the heat in your bones now, the kind of warmth that makes your limbs heavy and your thoughts slow. A bead of sweat slides down your temple, and you wipe it away absent-mindedly, feeling the rough texture of the dust clinging to your skin. The queens begin to move again, their giraffes stepping forward with that peculiar, long-legged glide. The Roman line ahead of them shifts nervously, shields clinking, helmets glinting in the sun. You hear the faint clatter of armor, the quiet hiss of whispered orders, and the occasional sneeze, because even in ancient battles, someone always has allergies. The queen's attendants follow closely behind, carrying banners, spare weapons, and yes, tiny pots of that pungent war paint mixture. You wonder if they had a royal recipe, passed down from generation to generation. Take 3 parts crushed sage, 2 parts goat fat, a generous scoop of camel dung, and a sprinkle of powdered shells. Stir counterclockwise under the full moon for maximum intimidation. You smile to yourself, the corners of your mouth twitching. This is the part of history that textbooks often skip over. The strange little details, the odd smells, the moments that don't quite fit into a neat, heroic narrative. A gust of wind kicks up, sending a swirl of dust across the field. You shield your eyes, blinking away the grit, and for a moment, the scene blurs into a soft, golden haze. Queens riding giraffes, banners snapping in the wind, the low rumble of distant drums fading into the background. You almost drift, your breath slowing, your eyelids heavy. The world feels quiet, like it's holding its breath, waiting. But then, there's a sudden shout. A Roman centurion barking orders, his voice hoarse and cracking in the heat. You catch a glimpse of his red plume, bent slightly to one side like a rooster having a bad day. He's pointing frantically, trying to get his men into formation. But honestly, they look a little panicked. You can't blame them. After all, they signed up to fight people, not giraffes with queens on top. You shift your gaze back to the queens, and there's something serene in the way they sit, so high above the chaos, so unbothered by the heat, the dust, the confusion. They hold their weapons lightly, their faces calm, and then, as the first arrow flies, yes, an arrow, your heart skips a beat. The giraffes twitch their ears, and you think, this is it. But instead of panic, the queens just tilt their heads, as if they've seen this all before. They breathe deep, the scent of camel fat and crushed herbs lingering in the air, and they press forward. You wonder, briefly, what it would be like to ride that high, to see the world from such a strange, graceful height, above the shields, above the swords, above the dust and the shouts. But you don't have time to think too long. The battle is just beginning, and you can feel it humming under your skin. You lean forward, squinting into the shimmering haze of heat, and suddenly you hear it, a sharp, metallic clang, followed by a chorus of shouted commands in a language that feels harsh and unfamiliar. The Roman lines are shifting, their shields locking together with a sound like 1,000 dinner plates clattering all at once. It's kind of mesmerizing, actually, the way they snap into formation like human dominoes. The giraffes, though, they don't care. One of them lets out a low, almost musical hum, a sound you didn't expect from such a tall, leggy creature. It's as if they're sighing, unimpressed by all the human drama unfolding below. You watch as the queens adjust their seats, tugging at leather straps and flicking stray beads of sweat from their brows. And then you catch it, a waft of something sweet and smoky, like roasted dates mixed with sun-warmed resin. You breathe it in, and for a second you feel almost relaxed. But then your eyes drift down to the ground, where someone's dropped a basket of dried figs, and ants are swarming over them, like tiny, determined soldiers. It's a small detail, but somehow it sticks in your mind. A reminder that life doesn't pause just because there's a battle brewing. The queens begin their approach, their giraffes stepping in slow, deliberate strides. Their banners ripple lazily in the breeze, a soft rustling sound that feels oddly calming. You half expect someone to start playing a harp, but no. It's just the steady thud of hooves and the occasional snort of an animal who'd clearly rather be somewhere else. The Romans, meanwhile, are looking increasingly nervous. You can almost hear the unspoken questions bouncing around their heads. Is this normal? Did we train for this? Does anyone have the manual for giraffe warfare? One young soldier, helmet askew, glances at his comrade and mutters something that sounds suspiciously like, "I told you we should have stayed in Gaul." The air is thick now, heavy with the scent of sweat, leather, and that peculiar mixture of herbs and oils the queens seem to favor. You catch a glimpse of a small, carved charm hanging from one queen's belt, an amulet shaped like a spiral, its edges worn smooth from years of handling. Some historians say these charms were believed to protect the wearer from misfortune. Others argue they were just fashion accessories that happened to survive in the archaeological record. Who's right? Well, that depends on which historian you ask, and whether you're feeling superstitious tonight. A sudden gust of wind kicks up the sand, and you cough, tasting grit on your tongue. The giraffes blink slowly, their long lashes catching tiny grains of dust, and one of them lets out a low, almost offended snort. The queens don't flinch. Their posture is impeccable, straight-backed, heads high, eyes steady. You, on the other hand, feel like you're slowly melting into a puddle of sweat and confusion. And then, there's a pause. The world seems to hold its breath. The queens lift their weapons, some with swords, others with short spears or curved knives. A few carry small, round shields, etched with swirling patterns that catch the light. The giraffes shift their weight, muscles tensing under their speckled hides. You can almost hear the crackle of anticipation in the air, like static before a storm. And just when you think the tension can't build any higher, a single Roman soldier breaks rank. He stumbles forward, tripping over his own feet, his shield clattering to the ground. You watch as he scrambles to pick it up, cheeks red, helmeted tilted at an awkward angle. There's a ripple of laughter. Yes, even here, even now. A few of the queens exchange glances, and one of them, just barely, lets a small, amused smirk curl at the corner of her mouth. You're suddenly aware of the absurdity of it all. Giraffes towering over a disciplined Roman army, queens in gold, and feathers riding like desert goddesses, and a soldier who probably just wants to go home and not have to explain how he lost a fight to a giraffe. And then, a sound, a deep, resonant thump, as the first Roman drumbeat rolls across the field. The giraffes flick their ears, the queen's fingers tighten around their weapons. Your breath catches, your heart skipping a beat, and for a moment, the world feels like it's teetering on the edge of something grand and ridiculous all at once. You wonder idly if anyone packed a lunch. You're suddenly craving dates, or maybe a cool drink of water. But no, there's no time for that. The battle is about to begin. And you, well, you're just here, standing in the dust, listening to the hum of history swirling all around you. The dust whirls in lazy loops around your ankles, warm and fine like powdered cinnamon. It clings to the folds of your clothes, creeps into your sandals, and tastes faintly of old bones and forgotten stories. You shift your weight, feeling the sand slide beneath you, and you realize this isn't just a battlefield. It's a stage, and you're caught somewhere between the audience and the actors. The queens are moving now, their giraffes stepping forward in that strange, gliding way, long legs stretching, hooves pressing soft half-moons into the earth. The queen's jewelry catches the light, a quiet shimmer like the faint sparkle of stars just before dawn. You wonder how heavy those necklaces must be, how many hours it took to braid their hair, how their robes feel against skin already sticky with sweat. And you catch a scent, too, faint, almost elusive. Crushed petals, maybe, mixed with something sharp and smoky. It's the war paint again, smeared across the queen's foreheads and cheeks in sweeping, purposeful lines. Some say the patterns were blessings from the gods. Others claim they were just practical sunblock. Honestly, no one really knows. Historians still argue about that in dusty conference rooms, probably over stale coffee and half-eaten pastries. You blink slowly, and that's when you notice the Roman line beginning to shift. The soldiers are raising their shields in unison, that familiar clatter like the world's largest dinner party gone slightly wrong. They form a testudo, a tortoise they call it, a living wall of shields that moves as one. It's impressive, sure, but also a little rigid. The queens? They don't seem impressed. One of them, tall, broad-shouldered, with feathers jutting from her headdress like a bird of paradise, leans down and whispers something to the giraffe beneath her. The giraffe flicks an ear as if to say, "I heard you, but I'm reserving judgment." And then the drumming starts again, low and steady, like a heartbeat in the dust. You feel it in your chest, in your toes, even in your teeth. Thump, 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 a rhythm older than the pyramids, older than the stones under your feet. A camel in the distance lets out a loud, disgruntled groan, as if it's entirely fed up with the absurdity of this whole scene. You stifle a chuckle. The queens raise their weapons. Swords catch the sunlight, glinting like tiny shards of fire. Spears tilt forward, their tips gleaming. The giraffes take a cautious step, then another. You can hear the creak of leather straps, the faint jingle of charms tied to saddles. And in that moment, you think, this is it. This is the charge. But it isn't. Instead, the queens halt. The giraffes pause mid-step, their necks swaying gently like tall, living metronomes. The Romans tense. You can almost see the beads of sweat trickling down their faces, the wide-eyed glances exchanged beneath heavy helmets. The queens wait. The giraffes shift, blinking lazily, as if they're wondering whether this is all worth the trouble. And then, from somewhere behind you, there's a sudden, unmistakable splat. You turn. A young servant, barefoot and sweating, has dropped a bowl of fermented date paste onto the ground. The smell is, how do you put it, unpleasant. Sharp, sour, and sticky, like someone's kitchen experiment gone very, very wrong. The servant freezes, eyes wide with terror, as the paste seeps into the sand. The queens, from their tall perches, glance over briefly, but seem more amused than angry. One even lets out a soft laugh, just a breath, barely audible, but you catch it. And you realize something. These queens, they're human. They sweat, they laugh. They probably get annoyed when sand gets in their shoes. It's a small detail, but it makes the scene feel more real. Less like a legend etched in stone, more like a snapshot of an afternoon where history decided to take a detour into the bizarre. The Romans, though, they're not laughing. They're adjusting their grips, peering nervously at the giraffes, probably wondering how exactly they're supposed to report this back to the Senate. Dear Senators, we were outmaneuvered by tall, spotted animals with an attitude problem. The giraffes snort. A breeze carries the scent of sweat, leather, and that lingering, slightly burnt tang of date paste. The queens lift their heads, eyes shining with something fierce and ancient. You feel your breath slow, your heart settling into the rhythm of the drums. The dust hangs in the air, thick and shimmering. Time stretches. And somewhere, quietly, you wonder if the giraffes are just as tired of waiting as you are. The battle hasn't started. Not yet. But it's coming. Creeping closer, slow as the sun across the sky. You shift your weight again, the sand warm under your feet, the air thick with anticipation. And you think, this is going to be one for the history books. The drums have faded into the background now, their echoes dissolving into the hot, humming air like a mirage. You shift your stance, feeling the rough sand against your soles, a tiny, gritty reminder that time is still moving forward. Barely. The queens sit tall on their giraffes, looking like statues carved by the wind. Their faces are still unreadable, but you sense something simmering beneath the surface, like the faint shimmer of heat rising from the desert floor. And the Romans, well, they're fidgeting. Shields clank against armor, sandals scrape the dirt. And somewhere, someone coughs, a dry, ragged sound that gets swallowed by the wind. A young soldier near the front wipes sweat from his brow and mutters something under his breath. You don't catch the exact words, but the expression says it all. What in Jupiter's name are we doing here? The giraffes, meanwhile, seem blissfully unaware of the gravity of the moment. One chews absent-mindedly on a dry branch, its jaws working in slow, thoughtful circles. Another tilts its head, gazing off into the distance, as if contemplating the clouds, if you can even see them through the haze. You wonder, briefly, if any ancient giraffe ever had an existential crisis about being in a war zone. Probably not. They were too busy trying to keep the queens from sliding off. One of the queens, Amanirenas again maybe, though it's hard to tell at this distance, lifts her arm, and the bangles stacked along her wrist catch the sunlight in tiny, blinding flashes. You hear the soft clink of metal on metal, a sound that feels almost delicate in the heavy, waiting air. She taps her giraffe's neck gently, and the animal shudders, its long legs shifting with an awkward grace. You catch a faint, spicy scent carried on the breeze. Dried coriander, maybe, mixed with the sharper tang of sweat and something earthy like crushed sandalwood, or, let's be honest, maybe just more camel dung. It's hard to tell out here. The desert is a master at blending smells into a kind of confusing, spicy soup. And then, a low whistle, sharp and sudden. The queens turn their heads slightly, a signal passing between them like an unspoken spell. The giraffes straighten, ears twitching, and for a moment, you feel the ground itself holding its breath. That's when you hear it. A deep, rhythmic thud, steady and relentless. Not the drums this time, but something heavier. A rumble, like distant thunder. The Romans, you realize, have brought war elephants. You blink, squinting against the sun, and there they are. Massive, gray, their skin wrinkled and dusted with the pale sand, moving with a slow, unstoppable rhythm that makes your teeth ache just watching. The queens don't flinch. If anything, they seem to straighten, their shoulders rolling back like they're ready for the challenge. You, on the other hand, feel a little less confident. War elephants, giraffes, queens, Romans. And you? Just a dusty, slightly dehydrated spectator wondering if anyone's brought water. The elephants snort, their massive ears flapping like ancient battle flags. You wonder if they're confused, too. After all, what's the proper protocol when you meet a giraffe in battle? Do you trumpet, charge, politely nod, and walk the other way? The historians, of course, argue about whether these elephants actually clashed with the giraffes, or if this whole story has been embroidered by time, woven together like a tapestry that no one can quite untangle. Maybe the queens never actually rode giraffes in battle. Maybe the giraffes were just symbols, or parade animals, or pets that happened to wander into the scene at the wrong time. But then again, you're standing here, aren't you? Watching it happen, in the heat and dust, feeling the tension ripple through the air like a taut string. You hear a Roman officer bark an order, his voice cracking like a whip. Shields lift, spears lower, and the testudo shifts forward, a slow, clanking beast of metal and men. The queens don't move. A giraffe sneezes, an odd, wheezy sound that breaks the silence. You suppress a chuckle, but it bubbles up anyway, escaping as a soft breath. It feels absurd, standing here in the middle of this ancient standoff, surrounded by war drums, elephants, and giraffes. The queens raise their weapons again. The giraffes step forward, hooves pressing deeper into the sand. The elephants let out a low, rumbling growl. Your heart beats in your ears, slow and steady. The sun hangs heavy overhead, casting long golden shadows across the field. And somewhere, in the back of your mind, you wonder if this is how history always feels. Messy, strange, full of unexpected moments no one ever really planned for. You take a breath, feeling the grit on your tongue, the sweat on your skin, the weight of time pressing down. The battle hasn't started yet, but it will, and you'll be here for it. The sun is lower now, dipping toward the horizon, but the heat hasn't eased. It just hangs there, heavy and golden, like honey poured over the world. You wipe the sweat from your forehead with the back of your hand, and it leaves a faint smear of dust across your skin. The wind stirs, gentle and warm, carrying the scent of crushed herbs, animal musk, and something else, something sharper, like the dry crackle of distant fire. The queens still sit tall, poised, as if they've got all the time in the world. Their giraffes stand motionless, save for the occasional flick of an ear or a lazy swish of a tail. You catch yourself wondering how they stay so calm. If it were you up there, perched 10 feet in the air on a creature that looks like a piece of abstract art come to life, you'd probably be gripping the saddle for dear life and questioning your life choices. But the queens, not a flicker of doubt. Their eyes scan the Roman lines, narrowing slightly, lips set in thin, determined lines. You wonder if they're calculating, measuring the distance, the angles, the timing. Or maybe they're just waiting, letting the Romans stew in their own confusion. The Romans aren't doing great, by the way. From your dusty little spot on the sidelines, you can see them shifting, adjusting their shields, murmuring to each other with the kind of anxious energy that says, "We're pretty sure we weren't trained for this." A few of them glance nervously at the elephants, who seem just as unsure about the whole situation. And honestly, who can blame them? You've got queens on giraffes, elephants looming like gray mountains, and the taste of something strange in the air, like old incense mixed with sweat and the faintest whiff of burnt honey. One queen, broad-shouldered, draped in layers of golden cloth that shimmer like a desert mirage, leans forward and whispers something to her attendant. The attendant, a wiry man with a sunburned nose and an expression that says, "I have definitely had a long day," nods and scurries off toward a cluster of warriors standing nearby. They're holding long, curved spears, the tips glinting in the fading light, and you notice they've tied strips of cloth around the shafts, red, gold, and deep indigo. Maybe it's a signal. Maybe it's just a fashion statement. You're not sure, and historians still debate that point too. The wind picks up a little, stirring the banners, making the feathers in the queen's headdresses ripple like the wings of giant, patient birds. The giraffes blink slowly, their long lashes catching bits of dust, and you swear one of them lets out a sigh, like a bored nobleman waiting for his tea. And then, just when you think nothing's going to happen, when the sun is slipping lower, the shadows stretching longer, a Roman horn blares, sharp and sudden, cutting through the quiet like a knife. The Romans lurch forward, a ripple of shields and spears surging as one. You feel it in your chest, a jolt of energy that makes your breath catch. The queens? They don't flinch. Not even a blink. Instead, they lift their weapons in a slow, deliberate arc. Swords flashing, spears tilting, gold catching the last rays of the sun. And you feel it. That strange, electric moment when the air seems to crackle, when the world holds its breath. A giraffe steps forward, its hooves pressing into the sand with a soft, muffled thud. Another follows, then another. And suddenly the queens are moving. Slowly, steadily, with a kind of eerie calm that makes you wonder if they're about to unleash something the Romans won't know how to handle. The Romans, for their part, seem torn between holding their formation and staring in utter disbelief. One soldier, a young man with a lopsided helmet, glances up at a giraffe as it passes by and mutters, "I didn't sign up for this." You almost laugh. Almost. The queens chant softly, a low, melodic hum that rises and falls like a lullaby. You can't make out the words, but it feels old. Older than the sands, older than the stones beneath your feet. The sound wraps around you, a soft, persistent thread in the tapestry of the moment. And then, as if on cue, the elephant's trumpet, loud, raw, shaking the air. The giraffes pause, ears flicking, but the queens stay steady, their gaze fixed ahead. You wonder what it must feel like, riding that high, so far above the dust and the clatter of shields, looking down at the chaos below. It's not just a battle, it's a performance. And you're part of the audience, caught between awe and absurdity, wondering if anyone will believe this story when you tell it later. The sun dips lower, the light turning soft and golden, casting long shadows across the sand. The queens move forward, their giraffes stepping in time with a slow, steady drumbeat. Thump, 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 a sound that feels like it could go on forever. And you just stand there, sand in your shoes, the taste of the desert in your mouth, and the strange, undeniable sense that you're watching a moment no one ever expected to witness. The battle's not here yet. Not really. But it's coming. And you can feel it. The light is shifting now, softer, warmer, a kind of honeyed gold that drapes itself across the desert like a blanket someone forgot to fold. You feel it on your skin, that slow, heavy warmth, and you breathe in deep. Dust, heat, the faint, dry scent of worn leather and oiled metal. And something else. That odd, spicy note that lingers in the air like a question you forgot to ask. The queens are still moving, gliding forward in that deliberate, unhurried way, their giraffes stepping high and careful, like dancers performing a ritual only they understand. The Romans watch, wide-eyed, shifting in their ranks. You catch a glimpse of a young soldier, helmet a little too big, chin strap slipping down, a faint smudge of dirt across his cheek, and he looks like he'd rather be anywhere else. He grips his spear tight enough that his knuckles turn white, and you wonder if he's thinking about his family back home, or maybe just wondering what on earth he's supposed to do if a giraffe charges at him. A queen lifts her arm, long, strong, bracelets jingling, and the giraffe beneath her tilts its head, ears twitching as if it's listening to a song no one else can hear. The sun catches on her jewelry, flashes off her earrings, and you squint, half blinded by the glint. And then you hear it, an odd, rhythmic clicking sound. At first, you think it's the drums again, but no. It's softer, sharper, like stones tapping against each other. You look around, trying to find the source, and there, on the far side of the field, a small group of men are crouched low, holding polished stones in their hands, clicking them together in a strange staccato beat. It's not music, exactly, but it's something. A signal, a spell, a distraction. Historians still argue about it, naturally. Some say it was part of a communication system. Others think it was a ritual to call the ancestors. And there's even a theory that it was just an early form of entertainment. Kind of like a really intense game of marbles. You smile at that thought, the image of ancient warriors pausing mid-battle to play a quick round of clickstones. The Romans, though, don't look amused. They shift uneasily, shields lifting, spears bristling like a porcupine caught in a thunderstorm. You hear the clink of armor, the soft mutter of prayers whispered under breath, the shuffle of sandals on dry earth. The queens chant again, low and steady, a hum that wraps around you like a soft blanket. The sound blends with the wind, the clicking stones, the occasional distant snort of a camel that sounds like it's deeply unimpressed by all of this. And then, because of course, one of the giraffes sneezes. It's a loud, wet, ungraceful sound, like someone dropping a bucket of water into a pile of dry leaves. The giraffe jerks its head back, and the queen riding it sways dramatically, gripping the saddle with both hands. There's a brief, breathless moment where you think she's going to tumble off, her arms pinwheeling slightly, her robes flaring out like wings, and then, somehow, she steadies herself, smooths her skirts, and lifts her chin as if nothing happened. You exhale, a soft, startled laugh escaping before you can stop it. And you think, well, that was close. The Romans don't know what to make of it. You can see them exchanging glances, a ripple of confusion running through the ranks. One soldier near the front, older, with a thick beard and a dent in his helmet, mutters something that sounds suspiciously like, "This is not in the manual." The elephants shift again, their massive feet stirring up little puffs of dust. They sway, ears flapping, tails flicking at the flies. You wonder if they're bored, or nervous, or just waiting for someone to tell them where to go. The queens, though, they are still, steady, watching. You can see it in their eyes, the quiet calculation, the way they seem to see beyond the heat haze and the shimmering air. They know the timing, they're waiting. And you're standing there, dust clinging to your skin, throat dry, a tiny itch starting at the back of your neck. The moment stretches. A bead of sweat drips down your spine, and then, faintly, you hear it. The distant, muffled thump of footsteps. Not the Romans, not the queens. Something else. The pulse of the desert shifts just a little. The waiting. It's not going to last much longer. The sound is low at first, barely a tremor, more a suggestion than a real noise. But it builds, slow and steady, a soft, rhythmic thumping that pulses through the sand and up through your feet. You shift, feeling it in your bones, and it's like the earth itself is breathing, a deep, ancient breath drawn from somewhere far beneath your toes. You glance around, eyes narrowing against the glare, and there, on the far edge of the field, beyond the Romans, beyond even the outer ring of soldiers, you catch sight of something moving. Slow, deliberate shapes, dark against the pale sand. It takes a moment for your brain to catch up. More giraffes. But these aren't like the others. They're wilder, leaner, their spots darker, and their movements sharper. They sway as they walk, necks high, ears flicking, eyes bright and wide. A herd, maybe a dozen, maybe more. No saddles, no queens. Just giraffes, raw and restless, their hooves pressing deep into the earth. The Romans haven't noticed yet. They're too focused on the queens, their shields raised, their eyes darting nervously from banner to banner, from queen to queen, trying to make sense of a world that doesn't fit into their neat, straight lines. The queens have noticed, though. You see it in the way they sit, the way their heads tilt slightly toward the sound. A faint, knowing smile plays at the corner of Amanirenas' mouth. Or maybe you're imagining it. And the giraffes. They keep coming, There's a flicker of movement beside you. An old man, skin weathered like driftwood, wearing a loose robe stained with years of sun and sand. He leans on a crooked staff, and his eyes, sharp and dark, glint with something like amusement. "They come for the salt," he murmurs, almost too soft to hear. You blink. "The salt?" He nods once, slow and sure. Salt, blood, it's all the same to them. They remember. And before you can ask what that means, he's gone, swallowed by the crowd, or maybe just by the heat. A breeze stirs, carrying the faint scent of crushed herbs, bitter and sharp, like dried sage mixed with something sweeter, maybe fig resin. You breathe it in, and it feels like you're inhaling history itself, dry and cracked and sun-bleached. The Roman line wavers, just a little. A soldier shifts his shield, another fidgets with the strap of his helmet. Someone sneezes, a high, startled sound that seems absurdly loud in the heavy air. And then, one of the wild giraffes lets out a low, guttural cough, not quite a roar, but not a gentle sound either. The Romans freeze, eyes wide, as if they've just realized the desert is full of things they didn't plan for. You glance at the queens again. They're watching, quiet and still, like statues carved from sunlight and bone. The giraffes move closer, their long necks bobbing, tails swishing lazily. And for a heartbeat, it's almost funny. Like a parade gone slightly wrong. But you know better. The queens murmur something, a word or a prayer or maybe just a soft hum. And the giraffes pause, the wind rippling across their spotted backs. You catch a flicker of movement in the sand. Lizards darting, ants swarming, a beetle rolling a tiny ball of dung with single-minded determination. Life doesn't stop, even when history holds its breath. A Roman officer shouts, voice cracking like a snapped branch. His soldiers tighten their grip, shields clashing, spears raised high. You can almost hear the thought rippling through the ranks. What now? And you? You stand there, sand in your shoes, mouth dry, heart thudding in your chest. The heat presses against your skin, heavy and insistent, and the giraffes, wild and regal, keep walking. The queens don't blink, and somewhere, deep in the haze of dust and sweat and ancient sunlight, you realize you're watching something no textbook ever quite prepared you for. The moment stretches, slow as molasses poured over hot sand. You breathe in, taste the salt, the dust, the faint tang of something metallic, like the edge of a blade. The air hums, the earth waits, and the battle, it's almost here. The air tightens, somehow. Not in the way that a storm builds exactly, but more like the moment right before you spill a cup of tea. The world holds still, balanced on the edge, waiting for the inevitable splash. You can feel it in the sand beneath your feet, warm, dry, pressed smooth by the passage of hooves and sandals and nervous, shifting feet. The queens lift their weapons again, slow and steady, the sun catching on the metal, glinting sharp and bright. The giraffes sway, their long necks tilting in unison, ears flicking like they're listening for a sound no one else can hear. You wonder if they're bored, or just waiting, like everyone else. The Romans are shifting now, too. You catch the murmur of whispered prayers, names of gods you half remember from a dusty history class. Mars, Jupiter, Fortuna. The clang of a dropped spear rings out, sharp and sudden, and the soldier who dropped it scrambles to recover, cheeks flushed red under the weight of 1,000 eyes. Amanirenas, yes, it has to be her, leans forward, resting a hand on her giraffe's neck. There's a kind of quiet in her gaze, a calm so deep it feels like the desert itself has slowed to match her breath. The wind picks up again, a warm, dry gust that brings the scent of crushed thyme and sun-baked rock. It lifts the edges of the queen's robes, teases the loose strands of hair that have escaped from tightly bound braids. It carries the soft, rhythmic clink of metal charms tied to the giraffe's saddle, the quiet creak of leather under tension. And then, because of course, one of the Romans sneezes. Loud, abrupt. It echoes across the field, cutting through the silence like a dropped drum. The soldier beside him jumps, bumping his shield. And there's a sharp metallic clatter as weapons knock together. A few of the younger soldiers glance around with wide eyes, clearly wondering if sneezing in the face of an impending battle is a bad omen. The queens don't react. They've seen worse. Probably smelled worse, too. You take a breath, slow and deliberate. The air dry and a little bitter. The scent of camel dung still lingers faintly, mixed with the sharper tang of sweat and that warm, almost sweet undertone. Dates, maybe, or roasted barley, left a little too long in the sun. And then finally, the queens move. Not a charge, not yet. Just a slow, measured step forward. The giraffes lift their hooves high, almost dainty, like they're navigating an invisible line in the sand. The queen's weapons tilt forward, points catching the last light of the setting sun. The Romans tense. Shields tighten. Spears lower. You can hear the scrape of metal on metal, the soft, nervous shuffle of feet trying to hold formation. And the giraffes, they just keep moving. You notice something else now. Small details you hadn't caught before. The patterns painted on the giraffes' flanks, swirling in ochre and charcoal, almost hypnotic in the flickering light. Some say those markings were meant to confuse the enemy, to make the giraffes seem larger, stranger, more mythical than they already were. Others claim they were just decorative, an ancient form of body art. Historians still argue, of course. That's what historians do best. A butterfly flutters past, its wings a soft blur of cream and gold, and for a moment, it feels absurd. This tiny, delicate thing drifting lazily through a battlefield. You watch it, your breath catching in your throat, and wonder if it knows where it is. The wind shifts again, and with it comes the faint sound of something cracking, like the distant snap of a branch underfoot. A sign, maybe, or just the desert, stretching its bones. The queens don't flinch. You blink, and it's as if the world has slowed down. Giraffes swaying, banners fluttering, Romans frozen mid-breath, eyes wide and wild. The sun dips lower, the shadows stretching long across the sand, the colors deepening to a soft, burnished bronze. And somewhere deep inside you, there's a tiny, giddy thought. This is it. You feel it in your bones, in the slow, rhythmic beat of your heart, in the soft hush of the wind as it wraps around your ears like a whispered secret. The moment is here. The battle is coming. And you, lucky you, get to watch it unfold. The air feels thick now, like you could slice it with a blade, or maybe just tear a piece off and tuck it into your pocket for later. It hums in your ears, a low, steady vibration that makes the hair on your arms stand up. You shift your weight, the sand hot and rough under your feet, and you wonder if this is what it feels like to stand inside a story. Right in the middle of the waiting, the watching, the not quite yet. The queens are close now. So close you can see the details, the tiny lines at the corners of their eyes, the delicate shimmer of sweat on their foreheads, the fine threads of gold woven into their robes. One queen has a long scar running down the side of her neck, pale against her dark skin, and it catches the light like a thin ribbon of silver. Another's hands are wrapped in strips of cloth, stained with something dark. Blood, maybe, or dye, or the residue of whatever strange concoction they use to anoint their weapons. The giraffes move with the same unhurried grace, legs lifting, hooves pressing into the sand with a soft, rhythmic thump. Their ears twitch in the fading light, and you swear one of them gives you a look, A long, slow blink, as if to say, "You sure you want to be here for this?" The Romans, for their part, are shifting. A murmur runs through the lines, a soft clatter of armor, the shuffle of feet. One soldier, tall, narrow-faced, with a thin scar running across his lip, glances sideways at the man next to him and mutters something under his breath. You can't hear the words, but the expression says it all. This wasn't in the plan. And honestly, you can't blame him. You hear a camel groan somewhere behind the queens, a long, drawn-out sound that seems equal parts complaint and resignation. The giraffes, for their part, remain oddly serene, blinking slowly, chewing lazily on bits of dry grass. And then, like a ripple spreading through a pond, the first movement. A queen raises her hand, fingers splayed, bracelets sliding down her arm with a soft chime. Her giraffe halts, head lifting high, ears perked forward. The other queens follow, lifting their weapons, their voices rising in a low, melodic hum that seems to blend with the wind itself. It's not a song exactly, more like a chant, slow and deep, a sound that feels like it's coming from the bones of the earth. You feel it in your chest, low, steady, like the thrum of your own heartbeat. The Romans tense, shields raise, spears lower, eyes narrow. A centurion, a broad-shouldered man with a plume that's seen better days, lifts his arm, signaling something you can't quite see. His mouth moves, but the words are swallowed by the wind. And then, finally, inevitably, the clash begins. Not all at once, not a sudden crash of bodies and blades, but a slow, almost dreamlike collision. A Roman throws a spear. It arcs high, spinning end over end in the golden light, and it thuds harmlessly into the sand a few feet in front of a giraffe, sending up a small puff of dust. The giraffe blinks, tilts its head, and takes another slow, deliberate step forward. A second spear follows, this one clattering off a giraffe's shoulder. The queen riding it barely shifts her weight, gripping the saddle with one hand and lifting her curved blade high in the other, her eyes locked on the Roman line. The Romans falter. Just a little. A few steps back, a hesitant shuffle, a quick glance over the shoulder. You can see it happening, the moment when confidence starts to crack, when training gives way to the simple, animal fear that maybe, just maybe, you are not prepared for this. The queens press forward, their chant rising, the sound wrapping around you like smoke, like silk, like the low rumble of a coming storm. You blink, the light blurring at the edges, the heat pressing into your skin. And somewhere, faintly, you wonder if you're dreaming. Or maybe just drifting, caught between the beat of the drums and the whisper of the wind, standing in a moment that feels too strange, too beautiful, too utterly impossible to be real. But it is. It's real. And it's happening now. The sun is low now, casting long, golden streaks across the sand. And the shadows, oh, the shadows stretch like threads, weaving the queens, the giraffes, and the Romans into one vast, strange tapestry. You blink, the light shimmering in the corners of your eyes, and for a moment, it feels like you're floating, not standing on a battlefield, but drifting through a half-forgotten dream. The queens move forward, slow and steady, their giraffes lifting their legs in that high, careful way, as if each step is a decision. The Roman line wavers just a little, like a candle flickering in the wind. Shields shift, spears tremble, and there's a rustle of whispered prayers, names of gods carried softly on the breeze. You feel it too, the tension, the pulse of it, ho and thrumming, like the faint vibration of a drum far in the distance. It makes your skin prickle, the fine hairs on your arms rising in quiet alarm. A queen near the center, broad-shouldered, her hair coiled high in a crown of braids, raises her hand, fingers spread wide. the sunlight catching on the rings stacked along her knuckles. The giraffe beneath her snorts, a soft, huffing sound that stirs a swirl of dust. And then she does something unexpected. She leans forward, almost casually, and pats the giraffe's neck. It's a small gesture, but it feels intimate. Like this queen isn't just a rider, but a partner in this strange, slow dance. The Romans, though, they're losing their composure. You can see it in the way they glance at each other, in the nervous, half-stifled coughs, the way one soldier's foot keeps twitching against the sand like a drumbeat out of sync. And then, as if the world decides to tilt just a little more toward chaos, one of the giraffes lets out a loud, almost offended snort, swings its long neck in a wide, lazy arc, and, oh yes, smacks a Roman soldier right in the chest. The poor man goes down like a dropped sack of flour, landing flat on his back in the dust. His helmet bounces once, twice, and then rolls in a slow, almost lazy circle, before settling at an odd angle, the plume drooping like a sad feather duster. You try, really, you do, not to laugh. But it bubbles up anyway, a soft breath that feels like a secret between you and the sand. The Romans? Not so amused. They shuffle back, shields raised higher now, spears poking forward in a nervous, jittery hedging of points. One of them, a younger soldier with freckles dusting his cheeks, glances at the queen on the giraffe and mutters something that you can't quite catch, but you imagine it's along the lines of, "What are we even doing here?" The queen's hum again, that low, steady sound that wraps around the heat and the dust, filling the spaces between the clinking of armor and the quiet, rhythmic thud of hooves. It's a sound that makes your chest feel warm, like the last embers of a fire on a cool night. The wind stirs, lifting the edges of the queen's robes, carrying the scent of crushed herbs and warm skin, and something faintly metallic, blood maybe, with a sharp tang of bronze. You breathe it in, and it tastes like stories, like old legends told under stars. The battle still hasn't erupted, not in the way you expected. No charging lines, no screaming masses. Just this slow, tense push and pull, a dance in the sand, a hum in the bones. And then, because this is history, and history is rarely neat, a camel somewhere in the distance lets out a long, drawn-out groan, a sound so bizarrely human that for a heartbeat everyone freezes, even the queen's pause. And you, dust on your lips, sweat at the small of your back, the heat pressing in all around. You stand there and think, this is the weirdest battlefield I've ever been on. But the giraffes keep moving, and the queens keep chanting, and the Romans keep gripping their weapons like they might fall apart if they let go. And you, well, you just stay there, a quiet observer, caught in the middle of a moment that's both absurd and sacred. The sun is dipping low now, the sky turning soft and bruised with streaks of violet and gold. The world holds its breath, waiting for something to break. Can you? You wait too. The sky is deepening now, turning a soft, dusty blue, streaked with pale pink and a faint smudge of orange at the horizon. The sun, low and lazy, throws long shadows across the sand, stretching the queens and their giraffes into tall, thin silhouettes that sway and ripple like desert ghosts. You feel the air cooling ever so slightly, not cold, not yet, but just enough that the sweat on your skin starts to dry, leaving behind a fine, salty crust. The scent of the day lingers, sun-warmed leather, crushed herbs, dust and a faint, bitter hint of iron. The queens remain still, statuesque atop their giraffes, but there's a tension in the way they hold themselves now, shoulders squared, chins high, weapons lifted just a little higher. They know something's coming. You feel it too, a kind of low, humming energy in your chest, like the moment right before a glass tips off the edge of a table. The giraffes shuffle, tails flicking, ears twitching. One of them lowers its head, lips brushing the ground as if sniffing for something hidden in the sand. Another lifts a front hoof and pauses mid-step, poised like a dancer waiting for the music to start. And then you hear it. Faint, but there. A soft, almost musical tink, 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 and it takes a second to place it. But then you see one of the queens, near the center of the line, tapping the hilt of her sword against the metal rings of her saddle. The sound is rhythmic, deliberate, like a heartbeat made of bronze. It spreads slowly as the other queens join in, some tapping their weapons, others clicking stones together. A soft, syncopated chorus that fills the air. It's hypnotic, almost soothing, like the sound of rain on a roof or the soft ticking of a clock in a quiet room. The Romans, though, they're not soothed. You can see it in the way they shift, the way their shields waver ever so slightly, the way a few of them glance nervously over their shoulders, as if considering whether a strategic retreat might suddenly be a brilliant idea. One soldier, a young man with a crooked nose and a patchy attempt at a beard, mutters something under his breath. Too quiet to catch, but his expression says it all. This is not normal. This is not okay. And you know what? He's not wrong. Because here you are, standing in a patch of sand somewhere between myth and memory, watching queens ride giraffes, watching Romans clutch their weapons like drowning men, watching the sun sink into the earth like a coin into a deep, ancient well. A gust of wind stirs, lifting the edges of the queen's robes, sending a puff of dust swirling across the field. The giraffes blink, slow and serene, their eyes reflecting the last traces of sunlight, and you wonder if they understand any of this, or if they're just waiting for dinner. A camel brays somewhere off to the side, a harsh, broken sound that echoes strangely in the quiet. You glance that way and catch sight of a young boy, barefoot, dusty, a strip of cloth tied around his head, chasing after a goat that somehow wandered into the edge of the gathering. The boy's laughter is soft, high, and quick, a brief, human ripple in the stillness. Such an ordinary sound, so out of place in the tension that for a heartbeat, the world feels absurdly normal. You half expect someone to start selling roasted dates and honey cakes from a food cart. But no, this is a battlefield, or at least it's supposed to be. Amanirenas lifts her sword higher, the metal catching the fading light, and the chanting swells low and deep and layered with that strange percussion of tapping and clicking. It wraps around you, fills the spaces between the whispers and the clinks of armor and the restless shifting of feet. And you think, this isn't just about fighting. This is a message, a show of patience, of defiance, of something older and wilder than tactics or strategy. You take a slow breath, tasting the grit in the air, the dryness of your own mouth, the faint, sharp smell of sweat and tension. The moment holds, and holds. And then, snap, a Roman soldier shouts, loud and sharp, and the spell shatters. Shields rise. Spears tilt forward. The giraffes take a slow, measured step, and you hold your breath. The battle is right there, so close you can almost hear the grains of sand shifting underfoot. It's coming, and you'll be here for it. The hush is so complete that even your own breath feels too loud. You stand there, still as the sand itself, listening, really listening to the quiet. The giraffes' tails flick, the wind stirs softly, and somewhere, the faintest creak of leather whispers like an old chair settling into place. The queens, statues on swaying pedestals, sit high and still, their eyes dark and focused. You notice the small details now, the way one queen's hair beads click gently against her cheek with every breath, the slight shift of a giraffe's ear, twitching toward the sound of distant drums that haven't quite started. The glint of a blade's edge catching the last pale light before dusk swallows the day whole. The Romans are trying to hold steady, but you see it, the shiver of uncertainty running through their line. A centurion, his face darkened with dust, a jagged scar tracing his jawline, shouts something sharp and urgent. His voice cracks just slightly, and you can't tell if it's from strain or from the weight of what's unfolding. The air tastes dry and old, like parchment and ash. You lick your lips, feel the grit there, and the faint salt of sweat that has long since dried. The queens hum again, low, steady, like a river flowing underground. The sound wraps around you, seeps into your bones, makes your heart slow just a little, like a lullaby sung in a language you can't quite understand. And then, as if on cue, one of the giraffes lets out a snort, a soft, puffing exhale that stirs a tiny whirlwind of dust. The wind picks up, just a little, enough to lift the edges of robes and banners, to stir the feathers in a queen's headdress until they flutter like small, restless birds. You think about how strange this all is, how strange you are, standing here in the middle of it. Queens on giraffes, Romans in battle lines, the smell of warm leather and herbs, the faint taste of copper on your tongue, the way the sand feels cool now, shifting under your feet as the sun slips lower and lower. And then, a small, absurd detail catches your eye. A Roman soldier near the back of the line has a feather stuck to his helmet. A tiny, soft, white thing, trembling in the wind. You wonder if he even knows it's there. You almost smile, but then, there it is. A flash of metal. A queen lifts her sword high, the blade catching the last, fading gleam of sunlight. She tilts her head slightly, a slow, graceful arc, and the others follow, like birds wheeling in formation. And that's when you realize they're waiting for the sun to drop. The timing is deliberate, measured to the heartbeat, to the moment when the light fades just enough to make the Romans squint, just enough to blur the edges of the world and make every shadow seem like it's moving. The giraffes sway forward, slow and smooth, their hooves pressing into the sand with the softest of sounds. The Romans shift again. Shields clatter. A spear point dips, catching on a neighbor's armor, and there's a brief, startled curse. The air tightens, like it's folding in on itself, pulling everything closer, coiling the tension into a single, stretched thin thread. And then, nothing. Just the quiet, the waiting, the sound of your own breath in your ears, the faint, rhythmic clicking of the queen's weapons, the low hum of the chant threading through the gathering dusk. The giraffes stop, still. The queens, their faces calm, their hands steady, hold the line, silent and tall, the desert's patient daughters. And you, sweat drying on your skin, sand clinging to your ankles, heart beating a slow, steady drum, stand there, caught in the space between now and next, waiting for history to tip forward. You feel it. The crackle, the weight, the quiet before the storm. And then, it happens. It starts small, so small you almost miss it. A soft, rhythmic drumming, not from the Romans, not from the queens, but from somewhere deeper, more primal. It's the sound of hooves on sand, giraffe hooves, steady, patient, deliberate. One giraffe steps forward, just a single step, a soft thump into the dust. Another follows, and another. And just like that, the line begins to shift. Slow, measured, like a wave rising in slow motion. The queens raise their weapons, blades catching the last threads of sunlight, spears tilting like slender, sharpened branches. There's no shouting, no sudden charge. Just this steady, inexorable press forward, like a tide that has decided it's time to claim the shore. The Romans, bless them, try to hold. You see it in the way they set their jaws, the tight grip on their shields, the way their knees lock into place. But you also see the flicker of hesitation, the way a few glances dart sideways, how one soldier's foot shifts ever so slightly back. A whisper of uncertainty, thin as a thread, running through the line. The elephants, too, seem to sense it. They shuffle, great feet stirring puffs of dust, ears flapping. One lets out a low, resonant rumble, deep enough to make your ribs vibrate. You wonder if they're trying to decide, do we stand with the humans, or do we follow the giraffes? The queen's chant rises, soft but insistent, like a lullaby that's also a warning. The sound slips through the air, winding into the crevices of the moment, filling the gaps between heartbeat and breath. You feel it in your chest, that slow thudding pulse of, this is happening. And then, as if the desert itself takes a deep breath, an arrow flies. Just one. It arcs high, wobbling slightly, and lands harmlessly in the sand, halfway between the lines. A ripple of sound follows. Roman voices, sharp and startled, a few scattered shouts, the clatter of shields shifting. Someone, maybe a centurion, barks a command, loud and strained, but you can't quite make out the words over the wind. The queens don't flinch. They just keep moving, their giraffes stepping in slow, deliberate time, tails swishing, eyes calm and half-lidded, as if they're bored by the entire affair. You catch a faint scent on the breeze, dried figs maybe, or the sweet, burnt edge of roasted barley. It mingles with the sharper smells of sweat and metal, the faint tang of something herbal. Crushed mint, perhaps, or ground frankincense. And there's something else, too, a sound you didn't expect. Laughter, soft, low, a quiet ripple among the queens. One of them, maybe more than one, letting out a breathy, almost amused chuckle. It's not mocking. It's not cruel. It's the kind of laugh you let slip when you know a secret and no one else has figured it out yet. The Romans glance around, confused. One soldier frowns, lips moving in a silent, "What's so funny?" But no one answers. A queen, tall, with a crescent-shaped scar across her cheek, leans forward slightly, resting her hand on her giraffe's neck. She whispers something, too low for you to hear, and the giraffe blinks, slow and sleepy, as if it's heard this all before. You wonder what she said. You wonder what it feels like to ride so high, to see so far, to hold a blade in your hand and feel no fear. The sky deepens, the light slipping into soft violet and deep blue, the edges of the world blurring. The chant hums, the giraffes sway, and the Romans, they hesitate. You can see it now, plain as day. They don't know what to do. And in that hesitation, thin as a breath, fragile as a single grain of sand tipping from one side of the scale to the other, you feel it. The moment breaking, the story turning, the quiet just before the storm truly begins. The first sound that cuts through the thick, humming air is a snap. Not loud, not a clash of steel or a scream, but the soft, brittle snap of a spear shaft breaking under too much weight, too much waiting. It's enough, though. The spell cracks. The Romans shift. The queens lean forward ever so slightly. And the giraffes? They keep moving, slow and smooth, as if none of this concerns them at all. You stand there, feeling the dust settle onto your skin, warm and grainy, like a reminder that you're standing inside a story. Not outside it, not watching from some safe distance, but inside it, caught in the breathless space between choices. The chant rises. It's soft, low, woven from the queen's voices like a thread running through the air, pulling at the edges of the moment. It sounds almost like a lullaby, but there's steel underneath. Something sharp and old, a promise folded into the hum. The giraffes step forward again. Hooves press into the sand, slow and rhythmic, like the ticking of a giant clock winding down. The Romans brace. Shields lift, spears tilt, but you can see it in their eyes. This isn't the battle they trained for. A Roman officer, broad-chested, with a silver-streaked beard and eyes like chips of stone, lifts his sword and shouts. His voice cracks, sharp and thin, cutting through the chanting like a snapped reed. His soldiers jerk to attention, but their movements are clumsy, unsure, like dancers who've forgotten the steps. A queen, Amanirenas, yes, it must be her, tilts her head slightly, just enough to catch the last sliver of fading light on the curve of her blade. There's a faint smile playing at the corner of her mouth, a whisper of amusement, as if she's seen this all before and knows exactly how it ends. And then, because of course, one of the giraffes lets out a loud, wheezy snort and sneezes. It's a wet, ungraceful sound, and it sends a puff of dust swirling into the face of a Roman soldier standing nearby. The poor man stumbles back, waving his hand wildly, eyes squeezed shut, and bumps into the man behind him, who stumbles into the next. And suddenly, well, the line isn't looking quite so crisp anymore. You almost laugh, but the moment's too thick, too tight, for anything but a tight breath through your nose and a widening of your eyes. The queens don't laugh either. They watch, steady, patient, as if they've got all the time in the world. The giraffes stand tall, eyes half-lidded, tails flicking lazily. A Roman spear wobbles in the air, then tilts, then drops. And that's when the desert wind stirs, stronger now, whipping through the banners and robes, lifting tiny whirlwinds of dust that dance between the lines. It carries scents, too. Sharp metal, warm skin, crushed herbs, and something faintly smoky, like the ghost of an old fire. The chanting continues, wrapping around the moment like a net, like a soft hand pressed against the pulse of the earth. You take a slow breath, the air dry and thick, the sound of your own heartbeat blending with the soft thud of hooves and the rustle of robes in the wind. And then, as if the story itself leans forward, waiting, a Roman soldier breaks. You see it happen, the way his eyes go wide, the way his shield drops just a little, the way his feet shuffle back, kicking up a small puff of sand. He glances over his shoulder, and in that glance, the line starts to waver. It's small, a ripple, but you feel it, like the first crack in a dam. A queen raises her sword higher, her eyes catching the last glint of light. The giraffes breathe, steady, slow, patient as mountains. The Romans breathe too, but faster, sharper, caught in the tight, high-pitched gasp of waiting for something they don't understand. And you hold your breath too, because this is the moment. You can feel it. It's about to tip, and when it does, the desert won't be quiet anymore. It happens all at once, quietly, softly, like a sigh turning into a storm. The first sound is a ripple, small, barely there, a shifting of sand underfoot. The giraffe's step, slow and unhurried, but it's enough to send a shiver through the Roman line. A shield tilts, a spear ogles, a breath hitches, caught in the throat. And then, a queen, Amanirenas, tall and steady, her head held high, lets out a single, sharp call. Not loud, not a shout, just a sound, soft and curved at the edges, that seems to bloom in the air like smoke. The chant swells, it's low, layered, a harmony of voices weaving together into something too old to name and too soft to hold. It curls around your ears, a hum that feels like it's vibrating in the soles of your feet, in the bones of your chest. It wraps around the thrum of the earth, the breath of the wind, the creak of leather, and the soft, slow swish of feathers. The giraffes sway, their ears flicking back and forth, tails swishing in slow, deliberate arcs. They move as one, a line of tall, living banners, drifting forward like a tide that refuses to be rushed. The Romans blink, their eyes dart, wide and wild. And you can see it. The question, the fear, the unspoken, what do we do now? A young soldier near the front grips his spear so tightly that his knuckles turn white. His breath is fast, shallow, ragged. He glances at the centurion, waiting for a command that doesn't come. And then, because chaos has a sense of humor, one of the elephants behind the Roman lines lets out a deep, grumbling groan. The sound rolls across the sand, heavy as thunder, and for a heartbeat, everyone freezes. Even the giraffes pause, ears pricking, nostrils flaring. The queens remain still, silent, watching. You breathe in, slow, steady, the air dry and full of grit. You taste the desert, sharp and dusty, warm against your tongue, as if the sand itself is trying to tell you a story. A Roman spear falls, the point thudding into the earth. A small sound, swallowed quickly by the wind, but it's enough. A ripple runs through the Romans, not a retreat, not yet, but a shift, a lean, a flicker of uncertainty that slides like oil across the surface of the moment. The queens, they see it. You can tell. Amanirenas tilts her head slightly, a soft, almost imperceptible nod. The other queens follow. The giraffes step forward, hooves pressing into the sand with a sound so quiet it feels like the earth itself is holding its breath. You can hear your own heart now, thump, 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 beating in slow, steady time with the giraffes' steps, with the queen's hum, with the low, restless groan of the elephants. And you wonder, just briefly, if this is what it feels like to stand in the middle of a story that's folding itself into legend right before your eyes. The sand shifts, the wind whispers, the queens raise their weapons, the Romans brace. And you stand there, caught between two worlds, waiting for the moment when the quiet snaps like a bone. It's coming. It's almost here. And the desert knows. It breaks with a sound that's almost too soft to hear. A breath caught in the throat, a hush dissolving into movement. The queens move. Not fast, not a charge, but a slow, deliberate advance. The kind of movement that says we were always coming, and you were always going to watch. The giraffes step forward, their long legs sweeping through the dust like ships gliding over a still sea. The queens lean into the rhythm, their weapons lifting, catching the last faint gleam of the sinking sun. The Romans falter. It's small at first, just a step back, the clatter of a shield slipping in sweaty hands. But you see it, clear as the lines in the sand. The hesitation. Amanirenas raises her blade high, the edge gleaming sharp against the violet sky, and you swear you hear her voice. A low, steady call that blends into the wind, a sound that hums in your bones. The giraffes pick up speed, not a gallop, no, but a long-legged, swaying stride that eats the ground in slow, powerful beats. Their hooves hit the sand with a soft, rhythmic thump-thump, and it's not loud, but it fills the air like a heartbeat, a steady pulse that you can feel in the soles of your feet. The queen's chant swells, low and layered, a song woven from the threads of the desert itself. It's not words exactly, not in any language you know, but it means something. It says, "We are here. We have always been here." And you, small, confused, uncertain, cannot stop what is already written in the dust. A Roman officer tries to bark an order, but his voice cracks, thin and strained, swallowed by the wind. A soldier drops his spear. Another stumbles backward, bumping into the man behind him. A shield tilts, breaks the line, and the careful formation wobbles, just for a moment. The queens glide forward, calm, unhurried. Their giraffes sway like tall breathing trees, their eyes half-lidded, serene, as if they are a beast above it all, because in a way, they are. You taste the grit of the sand on your tongue, Feel the dry heat settle into your chest, and you wonder, would you stand your ground here? Or would you, like the Romans, feel the weight of the moment pressing down, soft and heavy as a woven blanket, and want to run? A breeze lifts the banners, sending them snapping and twisting like long, restless ribbons. The scent of crushed herbs, sweat, and warm leather clings to the air, along with something sharper. Fear, maybe, or just the electric crackle of too much tension packed into too small a space. And then, because the desert loves a little drama, one of the giraffes lets out a long, low bellow, a sound so strange, so deep and resonant, that it seems to shake the very air. The Romans freeze. You freeze. The queens, they keep moving. Amanirenas' gaze sweeps over the field, steady and unblinking. You imagine her heart beating slow and calm, her breath even, her hands steady on the leather reins. And you realize this isn't just a battle. It's a performance, a statement, a story that the queens are writing with every step, every sway of the giraffes' necks, every gleam of metal in the fading light. The Romans blink, eyes wide and unsure. The elephants shuffle, uneasy, their ears flapping in slow, nervous arcs. And you stand there, feeling the moment stretch like a bowstring pulled tight. The sun dips lower, the sky softening into twilight, and the sand feels cooler under your feet. It's not over. Not yet. But the story is shifting, and you can feel it, like the slow, inevitable roll of thunder across a distant plain. Something's coming, and it's closer than you think. The light is fading now, soft and slanted, the last threads of gold unraveling into the cool blues of dusk. The sand glows, faint and muted, each grain catching the twilight like tiny scattered embers. You shift, feeling the grit settle into the lines of your skin, the folds of your clothes, the quiet edges of the moment. The queens slow their pace, but they do not stop. Their giraffes sway forward, long legs moving in a rhythm older than any battle plan, older than the Romans, older, maybe, than the sand itself. The Romans are breathing faster now. You can hear it. The quiet rasp of air sucked through dry throats, the soft clatter of armor shifting, the low mutter of words that might be prayers or curses, or both. You can see the whites of their eyes, wide and gleaming in the dim light. They glance at each other, waiting for someone, anyone, to make the next move. But no one does. The queens, serene as statues carved by the desert wind, hold the line. Amanirenas' gaze sweeps across the field, her face calm, unreadable, lit by the faint glow of the last sunbeams slipping away. She lifts her sword again, slow, deliberate, and it catches the twilight like a sliver of cold fire. And then, because history is never just grand speeches and clean lines, the wind shifts. It comes in soft, a cool breeze against the heat-stale air, carrying with it the scent of sage, of dust, of the faint, lingering sweetness of dried figs crushed beneath someone's careless step. The giraffes lift their heads, nostrils bees flaring, ears pricking toward the sound of rustling banners and the faint crackle of torches sputtering to life along the Roman line. A small, absurd moment. A soldier's torch flares too high. A quick burst of flame that singes the edge of his neighbor's tunic. The startled yelp is soft, almost comical. A reminder that even here, in the middle of this tense, brittle standoff, humans are still just humans. Clumsy, tired, sometimes unlucky. The queens don't flinch. They sit tall, their silhouettes etched against the deepening blue of the sky, the dark shapes of the giraffes towering beneath them. The sound of the chant has faded now, but you can still feel it. A low hum in your bones, a vibration in the sand under your feet. You glance down, and see a line of tiny ants marching in perfect, determined order across the battlefield, unbothered by the drama of queens and giraffes and Romans. They carry crumbs and grains of frond, each moving with the same quiet purpose, as if none of this matters to them at all. The Romans shift again. A centurion mutters an order, sharp, quick, but softer this time, like he's unsure whether to say it aloud. The formation tightens, shields rising, the edges of the line blurring as men adjust, huddle, brace. The giraffes take another step forward. It's so slow, so quiet, that you barely notice it until it's already done. Just another few feet of sand claimed, just another breath taken from the desert. The sky darkens, stars beginning to blink softly into place, distant and cold. You realize, standing there, that this moment, the slow approach, the silent defiance, the careful, deliberate patience, is the battle. It's not a clash of swords, not yet. It's the waiting, the weight of silence, the measured pressure of presence. The queens don't need to charge. They are the storm, and the Romans are already shaking beneath its quiet, steady roll. You take a breath. Slow, deep, tasting the night, the dust, the faint, sweet tang of crushed herbs in the air. And you feel it. The moment is almost over. But not quite. There's still a breath left to hold, a final step to take, a last thread to pull before the desert sighs, and the story closes its eyes. And then the desert exhales. It's not a roar, not a clash, not a shattering of worlds. It's a soft, slow breath, a quiet shift in the air, a loosening of shoulders, a settling of dust into the quiet. The queens hold, the giraffes hold, the Romans, they do not. It happens gently, almost imperceptibly at first. A single shield tilts, a line wavers, and then a step, one man's foot slipping back into the sand, then another's, and another, the line folding like a curtain gently drawn. The queens do not raise their weapons high. They do not shout. They simply remain. Tall, steady, watching as the Romans melt away under the weight of the silence they could not hold. You stand there, feeling the sand cool beneath your feet, the breeze softer now, brushing across your skin like a whisper. The air smells different, less sharp, less tense. There's still the scent of dust, of leather, of herbs crushed into the earth, but the edges have dulled, softened, like the end of a long, deep sigh. The giraffes shift, slow and calm, their legs folding into long, graceful arcs as they lower their heads. One licks its lips, eyes half closed, like a sleepy cat after a long nap. The queens sit tall, but there's something softer in them now. Shoulders relaxed, hands resting lightly on reins and blades. You see it in their faces, the quiet glow of having endured, of having simply been in the face of what others feared. And you, dusty, quiet, still standing there like a misplaced shadow in the middle of it all. You realize you've been holding your breath. You let it go, slow and quiet, feeling your chest loosen, your pulse settle, the sound of the desert returning. Not as a battlefield, but as it always was, wind and dust, and the faint, distant call of some bird you can't quite name. A queen glances your way, just a flicker of her gaze, but it lands, and it stays for a breath. There's a smile there, just barely, the kind that says, "You saw this, you'll remember." The sky above is velvet now, deep and dark, scattered with stars, some bright, some faint, some so distant you wonder if their light will ever truly reach you. And you stand there, feeling the quiet settle into your bones, the weight of the day fading from your shoulders, the soft brush of night against your skin. The queens guide their giraffes away, slow and haughty and deliberate, their silhouettes tall and sure against the starlit sky. The Romans are a memory now, faint shapes disappearing into the dark, footsteps fading into the sand. You stay a little longer, letting the dust settle, the air cool, the quiet sink in. The story is almost done. And so, with a soft breath, you turn. You feel the sand give under your feet, hear the faint creak of leather, the rustle of feathers, the quiet, persistent hum of the desert. You take a slow step, then another, and the world holds you, soft and slow, as you drift away. The stars blink, the sand whispers, the wind sings, soft and low, and you let the story fade into quiet, into stillness, into sleep.